What is a dirty little secret about an industry that you have worked in, that people outside the industry really should know? They put little weights in lipsticks to make them feel more expensive so they can charge more. Same for winning fishing tournaments. If it's the first time a professor is teaching a course, there is a good chance they are just one lecture ahead of the rest of the class. Nobody who actually sorts mail gives a shit about your package. The word fragile doesn't stop them from throwing it 20 feet into a metal container. It's really fun to pay $145 extra for hazmat shipping and see this box with explosive in big letters on the side show up at your front door with a big dent in the corner. When the health inspector shows up, a mad scramble happens in the back to clean the kitchen while they start the inspection in the dining per bar area of the restaurant. Microsoft Excel runs the country. Locksmith here. We can get into any lock, door within 30 seconds. All the posturing and bringing out a impressive toolkit and hammer drill is just showmanship to prolong the call-out. 30 seconds flat. I'll never forget when my neighbor in London locked herself out. We waited for a locksmith to come over. He literally opened the car door, looked at the neighbor's front door from a distance for about 2 seconds, then pulled out a long bent rod, walked to the door, stuck it through the letterbox, maneuvered it around for a couple of seconds, and the door was open. He undid the bolt from the inside. 100 quid, 15 seconds of work. But you don't pay for the 15 seconds, you pay for the decade of practice required to do the job in 15 seconds. 100 quid, 15 seconds of work. But you don't pay for the 15 seconds, you pay for the decade of practice required to do the job in 15 seconds. Smiley face. That's how repair works. 10 cents for thumping it. $100 for knowing how not to thump it wrong and break it worse. When an app pops up with a, "Do you like this app?" thing, the yes button goes to the App Store for a review. The no button goes to an internal complaint process. This on average filters upset customers away from the App Store and artificially raises App Score by a whole star on average. That is the only way most corporate service apps have 4 stars. A very popular local bagel shop, bakery I worked at advertised all of our baked goods were homemade. Dozens of muffins, Danish, cinnamon rolls etc., and they were not. They all came from Cisco, frozen on sheets. Many customers would rave about the baked goods saying they were the best they've had. God bless them. If you're ever buying bulk gravel, sand, crushed stone from a local pit, quarry that has scales to weigh the amount of product you're getting fucked because you're paying for water. Most of these pits, quarries spray the living fuck out of their stockpiles during operation to make the material heavier in the truck. Never buy by the ton, always buy aggregate by the cubic yard. It's a measure of volume, not weight. Source. I own a rock crushing business, multiple quarries, and I charge by the cubic yard to not screw the public. There is a lot of money spent every year that decides where specific items are placed on grocery store shelves. If you're at a grocery store that's part of a chain, and you look at a shelf and there's an item that's approximately at eye level, I guarantee you that the company that makes that item paid a lot of money to put them there. There's lots of weird psychological tricks that go on in terms of how stores are laid out. In the consulting world, nobody really knows what they're doing. You have to know your way around healthcare to get good healthcare edit. I had no idea this would get attention, but I'm so glad it did. Here's a summary of some tips. Thank you to many of the PPL in this thread for their own experiences and tips too. What you should know. Your patient rights. You can ask for a referral to a specialist. You can ask for second opinions. You can ask to see what is in your chart. Know your rights. If you have a family member in a hospital or long-term care home, please visit and be there as much as possible. When you are sick or old, you are just not able to summon the energy to be on top of med errors or even general care. The more eyes on the care and environment, the better for your family member. Advocate for your family member. Do some research too. What is the illness? What are some options? And take these to the doctor and ask if they're appropriate, with the patient's consent obviously, for the patient. Follow up. If the office doesn't call you, follow up. Keep following up with offices, pharmacies, specialists, etc. until you're satisfied. If you are in the States, review your bill. Go over every item and see what can be negotiated and hound them until you feel it's fair. The squeaking wheel gets the grease. Get a job in healthcare. Not a clinician? No problem. Environmental services and portering are excellent well-paying entry-level jobs that can get you potentially into a union. You will learn hospital and healthcare really fast. Before your family member goes home from hospital, make sure you see a discharge planner or a social worker to talk about discharge. Hospitals are full and they usually are pressed to send people home fast, with healthcare at home being an option. But it's not the only option. Talk to the discharge planner and push back if you need to. Look up questions to ask the discharge planner. If you want the doctor to do, prescribe, refer something and they choose not to, you are within your rights to say, "May I have that option noted in my chart? I'd like to keep track of what I've asked you about." Innocent, right? Well, it's a good way to get the clinician to think about whether they want their rebuttal of your suggestion in the chart. If it feels wrong, please see someone else. Don't just blindly trust health professionals. They're people too. They're not magic. Some are better than others. Read clinician reviews so you at least know what to expect. To all those folks who go into APPTS with chronically ill family or partners, you are guardian angels. Keep doing what you're doing. It is more supportive, and the optics for the clinicians matter, than you know. We touch your food with our hands. Weird. And yes, we wash them so often that they might fall off. That, or you get as souls that wear gloves for 12 hours and never change gloves or wash their hands. I wouldn't say it's mostly a secret, but agency staffing firms churn and burn college graduates who are basically thrown in the wild. The recruiter you worked with may be gone in 6 months, and that's why a lot of ghosting happens. Yeah, recruitment and headhunting are not altruist professions. They're not social workers looking out for clients' best interests. Storytime. I got a high-paying job via a headhunter. After 3 months at the new place, I realized I hated it, and I quit. 3 days later, I got a call from the headhunter, and he was irate, yelling at me over the phone at the top of his lungs. He called me every name in the book, and went hoarse from yelling. Turns out, he gets paid a commission for placing me at that job only if I stay at least 90 days. I just happened to quit on the 89th day coincidentally. So he lost out on a good chunk of money thanks to that. If your business uses an inventory company, your numbers will not be correct. Ex-farmer here. Specifically, I worked at a bio-certified one. Since there were no pesticides or herbicides used, every snail, every bug, every mouse had to be killed manually or by having a lot of their natural predators around, i.e. cats. The reason? Nobody buys tomatoes, or anything else with snail bites on them. How do you train the cats to eat the snails? Edit. Never mind, French cats, duh. Edit the second. Thank you all for awards. And now this is my most upvoted comment. I can live with this. Wells Fargo, and other banks. WF is just the worst I've had experience with, likes to come up with ways to illegally charge you fees. They then eventually get sued, pay a fine that is less than 1% of the profit they made on those fees, then finds a new slightly different way to fuck you some more. Rinse and repeat. Find a good credit union. Mega banks are all screwing you over. People like to think that data analytics is some objective truth when there is so much bias and room for subjectivity in data collection, analysis, interpretation, and communication. Oftentimes insights are cherry-picked datasets deliberately presented to make a specific point rather than having the data craft the conclusion. My billable hours are not the actual hours. HVAC guy here. Not really a secret, but homeowners sure think it is. Change your fucking filters. Bedbugs are actually incredibly common in hotels. It's just that nicer hotels generally have better means of treating them. Like an exclusive bedbug spa? We had this crazy machine that we used on one room at a time that would heat the entire room up to 140 F. Bedbugs die from overheating very easily. So yes, my hotel had an exclusive bedbug spa. The sauna of no return. A nicer hotel I worked at brought in bedbug-sniffing dogs twice a month. I've heard that most just assume that bedbugs are inevitable and unavoidable and just treat rooms on rotation whether they need it or not. Close one wing at a time, quietly fumigate, then move to the next wing. Apparently it's cheaper to do that than to risk a review that mentions bedbugs. I've heard that one of my local hotels brings in a dog to sniff out bedbugs as well. Zoos and museums are universally held together with double-sided tape. The size or prestige of the organization doesn't matter either. Aerospace has a phrase, get healthy in maintenance. Underbid the contract to win to the work. Then they overcharge on the maintenance activities. It's an investment strategy that pays well. Many aerospace sites have cash cows, long-term maintenance contracts that keep the money coming into the site. BTW, this is one of the reasons DoD spends so much. None of your restaurant food is made with love. Anger and anxiety is what made that muffin, Tina, don't you forget it. Airlines often make more money carrying cargo than passengers. Also, they have much stricter contracts about delivering cargo on time than passengers. If a plane is overweight, they will usually remove passengers before they remove cargo. Wash all of your new clothes. A very high % has been worn and returned. If OSHA ever pays attention to small breweries, the entire industry is going to be shut down. Edit. Me. Checking this comment just now. Link. Hotels don't change the comforter on the beds in between guests unless there's a noticeable stain on it. If the pillows are placed on a chair instead of on the bed at checkout, housekeeping assumes they weren't used and puts them back on the bed without changing the pillowcases. All of this is due to cutting corners in housekeeping because the keepers are under strict timers for each room, and they have an insane amount of rooms to do every day. Hampton advertises that they change the comforter between guests. That made me really uneasy when I first heard it because it was like, shouldn't that just be expected? See. Hotels are really nasty and I wish I never worked in them. What would make such a huge difference is hiring more housekeepers, extending the room cleaning time, and giving no more than 13 rooms per shift. How is one housekeeper supposed to clean 32 rooms in 8 hours without her deciding to cut corners so she doesn't get in trouble with the head? Impossible. I have had to assign 5 housekeepers' rooms in a fully booked hotel of 550 rooms. Math ain't mathing, you know? I worked at a major jewelry company in the U.S. When we wanted to buy jewelry, we paid what it costs to make the product, material, labor, shipping, plus 10%. I paid around $115 for a pair of $950 diamond earrings. When you go somewhere that has novelty beer dispensers that you and a group can take to your table, just know they are incredibly difficult to clean thoroughly and there's probably mold in there. I'm way late to this party, but I used to be a political campaign manager and political office staffer. The U.S. government is run by an invisible network of interconnected staffers. The good elected officials are informed, but it's still the staffers who inform them. They write bills, they write bill summaries, they research the issues, they write the things the elected officials say. Without staffers, the vast majority of elected officials wouldn't have a fucking clue what's going on. And we have an absurd amount of influence over the information they base their platforms off of. On the campaign side, the reason there aren't viable third-party candidates in the U.S. is that campaigns are highly complicated, absurdly expensive, and outrageously time-consuming. Successful candidates even for your state legislative races really can't do it all by themselves, which is why everyone hitches their wagon to a party. Only ultra-wealthy people can really afford to run their own successful campaigns. And even they usually need a party apparatus just to get the competent manpower required to run a successful campaign. Our first-past-the-post means of voting virtual guarantees a two-party system, because elections are just extremely difficult for individuals or small party organizations to campaign in. More product hits the floor and then thrown back on the line than you know. Source. Worked in a meatpacking plant. I got fired from a local grocery store because I wouldn't use chicken that fell on the floor. I was the chicken fryer and the lady training me told me to just throw it the fryer cause the oil will clean it. This lady pulled the fryer out to grab a piece that had fallen on the floor and told me to run it under the sink and put it in the fryer. I called the health department the day they fired me. High-volume recruiters spend an average of 10 seconds looking at a resume. Not all that much of a secret, but I used to work in a peanut butter factory. We produced about 25 to 30-ish different store brands ranging from very cheap to stupidly expensive. We had a grand total of 3 recipes: chunky, not chunky and no additives. Life coaches need life coaches the most. No one should really be hiring life coaches unless they love to give away money. There's no real licensing body, education, expectations, etc. It's literally just random people who like giving advice. Reddit gives crappy advice for free, might as well try that first. 75% based on personal experience. Of the people working on volume build housing sites in the UK think Persimmon, Bloor etc. give zero fucks about the quality of their work as long as they get paid and don't have to go back and put it right. The roses you buy at Valentine's Day were harvested around Xmas. It's the worst time of the year to buy roses, and I don't mean because they're more expensive. They're also the worst quality because it's a longer holding time between harvest and use than any other time of the year. Never ever send flowers through an order processing service. Look at the location you're in or sending to and talk to a florist in that area directly. Don't pick a picture off some external website. Ask the florist what they have and can make that fits your budget. If you're worried, ask them to text you a pic of the completed design. Customer service reps are timed on calls, so when we rush you, it isn't to be rude. The ice cream machine is not broken. No one put it in its cleaning cycle when it needed to be, so they're locked out of it until they do the whole cleaning process. I've worked in the music industry for 10 years and have access to financials of nearly 15% of all artists' recorded music revenue. Nobody is making as much as you think. The superstar artists who look like millionaires are not, in fact, millionaires. When you call a cable company to cancel, you speak with sales first. The deals they offer are not the best they can do. Many therapists are still practicing after probation or punishment for really egregious acts, and they don't have to disclose this to potential clients. If a therapist actually gets their license revoked, they often go into life coaching. Whenever you see a high-profile person publishing an opinion piece in a news outlet, 9 times out of 10, they didn't write that. The author came up with a 1 to 2 sentence concept of what they wanted to say. Their second-in-command engaged whoever the ghostwriter is. The ghost created the copy. The high-profile person's number 2 reviewed for necessary changes. The high-profile person themselves reviewed and signed off. And the number 2 engaged marketing people to place the piece in a news outlet. If you see an article from a CEO, a senior VP, a member of an elected body, anyone with status, they don't write their own stuff. This is not inherently bad. Organization leaders are busy, and they have the resources to have a team oversee their public-facing thoughts, so they don't have to worry about it. Still, the opinion pages of just about every news outlet in America, and elsewhere, are populated largely by ghostwriters. Source: I'm a ghost. The Defense Department literally just spends money to spend it without any actual purpose, just so they can say it was spent so they don't receive less next year. In my building with 10 men, the men's restroom was gutted and remodeled 3 times in 3 years. Nurses and doctors have too many patients, and the nurses are on the front line to alert the doctor on important changes in patient condition. Ideally, a nurse should have no more than 4 patients who are stable, but very frequently nurses will have 6 to 8 patients, and in that mix there are very ill individuals. We urge you to read R. Nursing frequently to get a true flavor of the atrocious dangers you are all in if you are a patient in the hospital. The medical establishment is gaslighting you with the nice websites, music in the lobby, smiling calm staff, but behind the curtain we are all scrambling to make sure we don't make errors. But with all the stress, long shifts, people are most likely dying from nursing and doctor errors. Most are avoidable if we weren't stretched so thin. The industry will say there aren't enough nurses, and that is partly true, but we've been in many situations where there can be safer staffing numbers. Coworkers calling the hospital offering to work and they are declined. Unfortunately, the medical system is all too focused on financials to pay big CEO and upper management salaries, and they answer to their shareholders' interests and not you, the patients. It is a dangerous time to be a patient. Again, I beg you all, en masse, educate yourselves by reading the nurses' comment on how scared they are. Anything marked "vent" is most likely a good read on a stressful and dangerous shift for a nurse. The vast majority of people working for pharmaceutical companies are hardworking, highly ethical, and proud of the work they do. We hate the executives as much as you do.